I'm Professor Stephen Dyson.
And I'm Professor Jeff Dudas.
And we're two political scientists who have just watched the two movie adaptations of Cape Fear, one from 1962 and one from 1991. We've done this, of course, because we want to get ready for the forthcoming Apple TV adaptation. We'd like to talk about the themes in the movie adaptations that exist so far of Cape Fear, those that are the same across the two movies and those that differ. In many ways, it's a story that deals in archetypes or in persistent themes, and themes that need to be retold for each generation. If you think about the years here, 1962 to 1991, it's basically the same span of time as to the forthcoming TV series. So we're going to break it down, we're going to give our reactions, and we're going to give some analysis in a way that hopefully stands alone as analyses of the movies and perhaps gets people ready for the forthcoming TV series. Jeff, you teach, one of the things you teach in political science is kind of law and society and law and popular culture, and apparently Cape Fear in both its iterations is a pretty important text in that field.
Very much so. It's a movie or a text that, particularly the 1991 Scorsese version, that has received a fair amount of scholarly analysis because, as we'll talk about here, a lot of this text is really about popular anxieties over law, and popular anxieties in particular over the relationships between law and justice. And I think it's one of the major, as you say, archetypal themes that recurs and that makes this text almost operate in the level of folk texts or folk art, which are these kinds of texts and characters that recur generationally, typically, that are important to a community, and they offer the opportunity, because they're dealing with archetypal themes, sometimes with archetypal characters, they offer the opportunity for each new generation to kind of put its own spin or its own attempt to make meaning out of these themes and these characters. And so Cape Fear becomes this kind of really interesting text that is a sort of index about what the community is thinking about at any one time regarding issues of justice, of law, as we'll talk about, I think today, sort of oppositions between the past and the present, oppositions between sort of nature and nurture, oppositions between civilization and barbarism. All of those kinds of concerns are put onto the screen in Cape Fear and done so in ways that are interesting enough and that are meaningful enough and that articulate with the audience enough that these are characters and themes that are worth revisiting, as you say, generationally.
Yeah, and there's a common plot structure, and of course these two adaptations are from I think it's a 1957 novel called The Executioners, which is, I haven't read the novel, I didn't quite get to go that deep, but I wonder if do you think that's to do with judge, jury, and executioner, that the law in all of these stories has what should be quite clean dichotomies between different elements of a justice system actually become subverted and kind of blend into one another? I
imagine that may well be the case. Nor have I read the original novel. But it would make sense.
Yeah, and each version of the story, where I was going with introducing the novel is to say each version of the story, the source novel and the two movie adaptations, has common elements, right? There is in all elements, and we understand this will obviously be present in the forthcoming TV adaptation. In all elements, there is a released convict, Max Cady, who has a negative relationship to a serving attorney, Sam Bowden. I think in the first movie, Bowden is a lawyer, but actually he enters Cady's life by interrupting a crime that Cady is. Cady is a sex criminal, interrupting a crime that Cady is in the process of committing, and then testifying against Cady, thus ensuring a conviction. In the second movie, it's that relationship's a little more complex because Sam is Cady's assigned defense lawyer, and sort of misfulfills that role or subverts, the way that role should be done procedurally. Although, of course, this brings us to one of the great dichotomies. Substantively, there is no doubt that Cady is a sex criminal in both versions who deserves to go to prison. And what Sam does as his defense lawyer is he doesn't represent him zealously as a defense lawyer. He buries evidence that could have perhaps been a viable defense for Cady. But substantive justice is done by Cady going to prison. Cady then turns up and sort of seeks to avenge himself upon Sam by invading Sam's, profession, but even more crucially, Sam's family life, and in particular, invading his home and his I mean, I was going to say invading. He does actually literally seek to do this. His wife and daughter, and certainly that family unit.
Yes. And, a couple other things just in terms of plot. In both versions, the original relationship between Cady and Bardem exists apart from the locale of all of our action. So in the 1962 version, they first run across one another in Baltimore, right? And then in the intervening years in which Cady's been in prison, the Bardem family has moved down to North Carolina. In the 91 version, they first come across one another in Atlanta and then move down. So there's something about the passage of time and the passage of space that makes the Cady figure even more menacing, because it's not like he's just sort of stumbling upon or renewing in an accidental or happenstance way this earlier relationship with Bardem. He's actively seeking it out and pursuing it.
Yeah, and that's super interesting. And I'm not originally American, and you are, as might be obvious from the way we're speaking. But the South is actually a character in certainly the 1991 movie. It's explicitly referred to as, the South has a long history with pain,
fear.
Yeah, and with fear and slavery and all sorts of other things. And I did watch both movies, but especially the 91 movie, and see them as staging key elements from American history, or a key evolution, or maybe a devolution, depending on how you want to talk about it, in the American story. A story of the settling of an elemental land, the imposition of a particular form of government and society, which maybe reaches its high point in the 1960s version. Yeah. But the incomplete nature of the subordination of the existing forces of the American continent beneath that quote unquote civilization that maybe is more stark. I mean, you'll have to tell me more stark in the south than in the north, or
well, I think what's happening, at least in the Scorsese version, which I agree is considerably more prominent as a theme, is that Scorsese seems to be really leaning into the sort of the Southern Gothic horror tropes in a way that I think are hinted at in the original movie, but really brought to the surface and in a variety of ways, as you say. I mean, the first time we're introduced to Max Cady as he's being released from prison, we get a look at his prison cell wall, and featured amongst the other sort of intolerant, racist authoritarians that are up there, like Stalin, is Robert E. Lee, right? So the icon of kind of Southern resistance and Southern opposition to an attempt to create a more racially egalitarian polity. And then there's at one point we see that Cady has a bumper sticker, which it's very quick, but the bumper sticker says "American by birth, Southern by choice," and so it's leaning hard into that. And you're right. And then we've got the 4th of July parade, which features these kind of iconic moments in American history. We get a recreation of Washington crossing the Delaware. We get the recreation of the famous Iwo Jima sort of last stand, but intermixed in those flags are including sort of the rebel flag as well, right? And
rather crucially, I don't know if you are going to make this point, but rather crucially, this is a point at which Sam crosses from one side of the parade to confront Cady, maybe physically for the first time, or Sam's losing his temper or taking the initiative for the first time. So he's almost crossing American history, and these are these displays of the American state's use of force. Yeah. And Sam's on one side of the divide, and Cady's on the other. And Sam, it's fairly on the nose in symbolic terms, but it works as part of the symbolic system of the movie.
Yeah, and I think that's prominent for sure in the Scorsese vision. And there is this kind of tradition in American storytelling about the South, right? This kind of Gothic horror tradition, which does lean into the sort of more mystical elements of Southern life, right? So, I mean, for example, both movies are really lean hard into like the natural elements of the South, right? Think about the ways that you've got the different kinds of trees that are hanging down over the river, the way in which, particularly in the 1962 movie, like the long scenes in which Cady is sort of hiding in the river bush, waiting to kind of get out into the naturalistic elements. So there's a certain way that the movie means to employ the Southern backdrop in a way that the American South has conventionally been deployed as this sort of barometer on one hand of extreme beauty, extreme natural beauty, against which these horrors of humanity play out, right?
Yeah. And maybe also a certain courtliness or politeness that can actually hide sort of great violence. And Cady he's very languid, especially in the 1962 movie. He moves slowly and is kind of languid in that way, and he's extremely courtly.
Yes.
But in the way that he relates to a lot of people until a moment snaps and the kind of violence and red tooth underneath comes erupting out.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And one of the key differences between the two portrayals of Cady, the Robert Mitchum version in 62 and the De Niro version in 91, is they are portrayed a little differently. I mean, you get the sense that the Robert Mitchum version is a little more, as you say, a little more courtly. His background appears to be a little more elevated, right? And he seems a little more natural, right, in that role. Whereas the De Niro performance, he's explicitly referred to on multiple occasions as being sort of, very low sort of social class, kind of from the sticks, right? He refers to his, he grew up in a Pentecostal family, I should say, in which, they did things like speak in tongues. And one can presume that this is the sort of place in which as sort of church, it wouldn't be out of place to see the preacher being bitten by snakes, right? And doing this sort of the whole kind of very animalistic elements of kind of backwoods American culture, right? Which seems, again, Scorsese leans hard into that in ways that I think the Mitchum performance suggests that Mitchum is a little more comfortable with the more courtly elements, as you say, of Southern manners.
Another thing that's going on is De Niro is this kind of chewing scenery. I mean, he's really sort of enjoying himself, and it's often Pacino in the later period who's given shit for doing that. But this is a Pacino-esque De Niro performance. I think it's big.
It definitely is, in a way that Mitchum's performance is, and we had talked about off screen. In a certain way, I think Mitchum's performance is more unsettling.
Yeah,
and a little more, scary in a certain way than De Niro's.
But De Niro's kind of lowborn performance or lowborn characterization of Cady is also horrifying. It's just in a slightly different register, because the horror for the, I don't know, civilization coded or northern coded or however you want to read Nick Nolte's Sam Bowden, the horror is that Cady is invading everything about him, everything about his self-image and his masculinity. And in this in particular, Cady's better at the law than Sam Bowden.
Yes.
Cady has moved from not only being low-born, but he's moved from being illiterate.
Yes.
And he's taught himself Bowden's world in a way that he can best Bowden.
Yep.
And he's now sort of better read than Bowden is. And he's more effective in that world. And that's the danger for, or maybe the true fear of the highborn or the more aristocratic element of society is that you actually can't maintain those boundaries. You can't keep the people below you.
Yeah.
And then they invade. He's not only here to steal his wife and his daughter and all the rest of it, but actually his whole claim to being a learned, more civilized member of society.
To steal his identity.
Yes.
Right. And this is where, talked about in the introduction, that one of the real great themes of this text is the relationship between a kind of rule of law and the possibilities of justice. And one of the things that scholars have spent a lot of time thinking through is the nature of the justifications or the claims on behalf of a society that's governed according to a modern rule of law. The emphasis in those societies, the justifications for why law exists, have to do with the operation of procedures and processes. That what turns a society modern, what distinguishes it from sort of a pre-modern superstition or barbaric-based society or kin-based society, really, is the way in which the society is orchestrated and governed according to a series of pre-existing rules and regulations that are said to be neutral. They are said to apply in all circumstances, or at least in most circumstances, to all or most people. And that what the operation of this kind of empire of procedures gets you is, on one hand, it gets you order, right? It's a way to solve social conflicts without resort to violence, without resort to vigilantism. But it is, on the other hand, also a society that, precisely because it is operating according to these pre-existing neutral procedures, delivers justice. And so it's a kind of a dual promise: order on one hand, justice on the other hand. But one of the great anxieties that has always been staged in kind of popular storytelling about law is that the justice that this sort of legal order delivers is really confined to the operation of procedures, and that it is not, as you had mentioned earlier, a kind of substantive justice in which the focus is upon, well, has the correct outcome been reached here? And so what a modern rule of law tends to do is it tends to privilege what we could call procedural justice. So long as the rules have been followed, the outcome can be said to be fair, even if it's incorrect. And both of these texts are really staging this kind of anxiety about a society that, or societies that, in fact, do operate or attempt to operate through rule of law, but are not capable of producing substantively just outcomes. In this case, making sure that someone like Max Cady, right, a sadistic, who's referred to in the first movie as a degenerate, right, or an animal in both movies, is actually prevented from, as you say, invading and causing the chaos and disorder and violence that law is supposed to forestall. And so this is, our lawyer is impotent, right? And another theme that you wanted to sort of dig into, our lawyers in both of these movies, as lawyers for long stages of the movies, are basically incapable or impotent at staving off these civilizational threats, which are made all the worse in the figure of Cady, as you suggest, because Cady has figured out how to use the procedures of law in his own, for his own sadistic purposes.
I mean, there's two problems in this line of thinking. One is that when Cady comes at Bardem finds out that he is impotent in the use of the law, or that the law cannot help him. And there's numerous discussions in both movies where, he'll go to the police and the police will say, well, Cady hasn't done anything really yet that we can arrest him for. And would you one day, in the first movie, there's this exchange, like, I can't just arrest a man because he seems threatening to you or what might be in his mind. That would be a dictatorship. And
in fairness, they do try, right? Particularly in the first movie, there's an entire sort of regime of like rousting and legal harassment, police harassment. Yeah,
this is where I wanted to go. That's one problem, right? Bardem can't. The law is not powerful enough to protect Bardem from this obvious threat that everyone can see is destructive and needs to be taken care of, and Bardem needs to operate in a different register. The other problem with the law and the way it's delivering justice or working properly is that Bardem has in fact subverted it.
Yes.
Right. So Cady is both overpunished and underpunished, or I mean maybe that's not the right terminology, but the law is shown. It's certainly
he's both legally and extra legally punished.
Yeah, exactly. And he is screwed over. Yeah. Right. Like that defense in a neutral procedural system of justice, all of the evidence in Cady's case should have been brought forward, and he may well have been convicted anyway. But he also, and this is the hard thing to face, he may not have been convicted, and that would have been procedurally proper, but actually in terms of natural law or whatever, improperly. But that is also going on. It's still present as an undertone, I think, in the 1962 version, because the police chief, when Bardem goes to him and says, I've got this problem, the police chief is like, Sam, I know you. We're clearly buddies, meaning we're of the same kind of social class and all the rest of it. We're on our side. Yep. Let's I can't do this for you formally, but let's me and you brainstorm on ways that we can use the force of the state outside of the law to make life impossible for Max Cady. And they're totally down with it. Yeah. And they really go as far as they can to try and help Sam out outside of the law.
They do. And so they're eventually stopped because, as you say, they eventually reach a point at which you simply can't go any further without crossing a sort of invisible but important barrier into vigilantism. But also it doesn't work, right? And Cady, because of his sort of legal acumen and the fact that he is a legal actor in a certain way, just the same as the rest of them are, the same as Bowden is, he basically puts a stop to it with his capacity and his learning in law.
Right. Yeah. So in the resolution of the 62 movie, the system is broadly restored, right?
Yes.
I mean, as I read the end of the movie, so Sam bests Cady physically, which is important.
Yes.
I think, right? Don't they have a fist fight at the end, and Sam kind of gets the better of him?
Sam, it's a fist fight, and then he ends up being able to locate the gun,
right,
and shoot him.
And so Cady's thinking, well, I'm going to get shot here, and so the viewers, like,
Yes.
and Sam says, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to
Yes.
move this back into the system. You're going to go to prison,
And
rot in a
importantly,
cage.
along those lines, in the 1962 version, the entire houseboat scene is a police sting.
Yes,
It operates from within and under the color of law, right? So Sam tries the vigilante route, right? He tries to beat him up. That doesn't work, and he gets himself in trouble, right, with the bar association. But the ultimate resolution, right, and the ultimate defeat of Cady takes place as a police sting, right, and under the color of law. So there's this kind of redemption, right, after having staged a movie's worth of anxiety about law's incapacity to produce substantive justice, in the end, right, the audience is meant to be reassured that proper procedure can, in fact, still produce substantive justice.
right. Whereas in the 1991 movie, the resolution is very different.
Yes.
And they do have a physical confrontation, but and Sam is sort of, I don't know, they beat each other to a draw, but Cady's like very, very weakened by the series of events.
Yeah.
And in the end,
It's been set on fire.
yes, exactly. And in the end, Cady is kind of subsumed by the underworld. The Cape Fear Lake kind of draws him down.
Yes.
While he's speaking in tongues. He's burned. He's sort of a fairly literal demonic figure at this point, and there is a biblical Satan thing going on in these movies.
Yeah, and the second movie in particular is, I think, very obvious about its opposition of sort of human rule of law-based order versus biblical order. Right. And the possibilities of truth and justice that are associated with each. And clearly, at least for Cady, truth and justice are one and the same under sort of religious Old Testament biblical principles. And it's exactly that connection between truth and justice that the 91 movie in particular, is very cynical, can occur within legal procedure.
Yeah. Yeah. The other theme that I think we should talk about before we end here is the daughter and the portrayal of her. And I think the 62 movie is both portrayals rest on the fact that she's underage and that she's an object of sexual desire for Cady, perhaps like an object, because he is a sex criminal and an incredibly lecherous man. He's an object in that regard, but also because he's a precious object. She's a precious object, to her father. The 62 movie is a little more elliptical in the way that it depicts her.
Because it's 1962.
Sure, but you get the way she's dressed in the movie and the way she's shot. You clearly get the impression she's supposed to be in that very uncomfortable for the viewer, liminal space between girl and woman.
Yeah.
The 1991 movie, with Juliette Lewis's remarkable performance, addresses this much more head on. And it's clear that Danny in the 1991 movie is a young woman of sort of burgeoning sexuality, and Cady intuits this.
Yes.
And sort of presents himself as a fatherly, I don't know what the right word
mentor
is.
of some sort.
But explicitly in sexual matters, and is sort of successful, at least to some degree, in seducing her.
Yes. I think it's one of the things that makes, to the extent that I think the 91 movie makes you more uncomfortable as a viewer, it's that.
Yeah.
Right. So if I would tend to give the edge to Robert Mitchum as the more harrowing and unsettling version of Cady, I think, to the extent that the 91 movie is really unsettling and harrowing, it is precisely in that kind of it's a seduction.
Yeah.
Right. That Cady performs with Danny.
Right. And it's and Juliette Lewis's performance is sort of widely remarked as being incredible in occupying that liminal space.
Yeah.
And at one moment she's a girl, and at another moment she's a woman. One of the very uncomfortable scenes, and I think deliberately so, was not between Cady and Danny, but was between Bowden and Danny. in that he's her father and he comes into her bedroom and she's just wearing her underwear and he remarks on it like, put some clothes on, you're not a little girl anymore.
Yeah.
And it's a very uncomfortable moment from a viewing standpoint.
Yeah, that's very uncomfortable. The other scene that's very uncomfortable is when he confronts her after she has, had this sort of theater interaction with Cady. And, you see Bowden's quick temper and quick sort of easiness towards violence.
Yeah.
Himself.
Yeah.
And so she is, the Danny character is, I think in a certain way, maybe the beating heart of the Scorsese version of the movie, in a way that I think you're right. She definitely is not that. The analogous character is definitely not in the 62 version.
Right. Although in both cases, there is an attempt to make her not just the helpless daughter, right? Like in the 62 movie, the wife says to Sam, "Don't worry about her. She's pioneer stock," which is sort of redolent with historical overtones. But also, I think that they're saying she's tough. She's tough, agentic, and she definitely is in 91. And she has most of the good ideas for physically besting Cady.
Almost all of them, actually,
come from her. She's the kind of smartest part. All right, a couple of bits of ephemera to finish here with. In sort of fantasy casting realms, it turns out that originally Steven Spielberg was going to direct the 91 Scorsese movie, but found it too violent in the end and went off to do Schindler's List, traded Schindler's List with Scorsese. At one point, Harrison Ford was down to play Sam Bowden, but only wanted to play Max Cady.
Yeah, I think Ford would be fine as Bowden. I don't see him as a Cady type. Interestingly, Spielberg is listed as an executive producer on the new Apple TV
doesn't
series.
surprise me.
Who knows what that means? Scorsese is also listed as an executive producer. Right. I don't know if that means like it's a Zoom call that they had in advance or what. But it's going to be very interesting to see what the new adaptation does over, I presume it's over 10 episodes with this story. And the sense that I can get just from the trailers is that rather than, I think Amy Adams is playing the attorney, right? Mm-hmm. And so we're getting what appears to be a different dynamic between the Bowden analogous character and the Cady character played by Javier Bardem just right off the bat. So it will be interesting to see. There's a lot of family dynamics as well, as you have alluded to, that get exploited or worked out in this text as well. And so it'll be interesting to see how those things develop here.
Yeah. The last bit of ephemera, Nick Nolte in 1991 is the spitting image of former U.S. Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld. Really a remarkable...
Yeah. Which I certainly had not picked up on until you... Well, look, you go to war. You go to screen with the actors you have, not the actors you want.
Yes, exactly. He should have just given Cady a lecture on things we know and things we don't know. And Cady would have
known unknowns.
Gotten bored halfway through and said, screw it, Counselor. You win this one, Mr. Secretary. Yeah.
As usual, spot on Southern accent.
Thank you. I can outlearn you. And then the last thing... I was watching this this movie and I thought, wow, this is really the plot of Wrath of Khan. With Cady in the Khan role, and even burn him up like they burn up Khan and Bowden and Kirk are the White Whale, which actually means the Uber text in the background of all of this is Moby Dick.
Okay, fair enough.
Free piece of final film theory there.
Cady is pulled down to the netherworld. Just like in... Right?
Yeah, I'm telling you that is the Uber archetype here. All right, so we are looking forward to the Apple TV series. We'd love to hear your thoughts on both what you're looking forward to in the series and if you've seen these movies, what you make of them. Totally recommend them as preparation for the new TV series. But on that bombshell,